much unemployment and resources left idle. In his words, I quote, "Cost of governance is always a key factor in the socio-economic development of any nation, but it is also one side of an important coin. We must not look at the cost of governance alone. We must weigh the cost against the benefits derived therefrom. For example, one can pay a high cost on a productive enterprise, but reap a higher benefit, and such would be considered a good investment. However, one can pay a low cost but reap no benefit at all because the endeavor was inherently unproductive. This would be a waste. Thus, we must be careful in what we say and truly mean when we talk about cost of governance." Those are the words of the former governor of Lagos State, Ahmed Tinubu. He urged that the development of any populous nation has always been dependent on the ability of government to allocate sufficient funds to projects and programs that create and encourage enduring growth and employment. Adding, in his words, we must reject the mode of thinking that assumes government expenditure is inherently unproductive as well as harmful to the overall economy. The issue is not whether government is spending money or not. The real issue is the economy utility and quality of the expenditure. Fiscal wisdom, but not necessarily austerity, is required for an economy like ours in a time like this. To ensure equitable wealth redistribution and meaningful use of resources, the years have shown that the private sector is much too weak to spur the growth we need. If the private sector could manage this feat, it would have done so. Where the private sector is too weak and unable, the government must fill the void. This means government must be afraid to embark on an activist fiscal policy to create jobs, build infrastructure, and develop our industrial sector, as well as continue to improve agriculture. Tinubu also dwelled on the pervasive insecurity across Nigeria, saying that, okay, we'll get back to the issue of insecurity shortly, but let me just take Lalong's keynote lecture that was titled "Reducing the Cost of Governance for Inclusive Growth and Youth Development in Post-COVID-19 Northern Nigeria." Commended the efforts of the Sultana of Sokoto in laying a solid foundation for Nigeria. Lalong did. Lalong, he's also the governor of Plateau State. He said in his words, "Returning the northern region to normalcy is one of the highest priorities of the Northern Governors Forum. Achieving the feat, however, will require ending insurgency, banditry, and other forms of insecurity and have become the persistent plight of the region for more than a decade." And in his words, he also said he spelled out the role of the northern governors in reducing the cost of governance in the region and enhancing youth employment. In Lalong's words now, looking at the poor economic situation of the region and the need to find ways of reviving the region's economy with a view to develop the area, constituted another committee chaired by the governor of Kebbi State, Alhaji Bagudu Atiku, to come up with ways of improving the region's economy. The robust economy is as envisaged by the northern governors will ultimately lead to more funds for capital expenditure and general development of the region. Those are Lalong's word. Let me take you back to a week ago, where the former managing director of defunct Diamond Bank, Mr. Alex Oti, said that the cost of governance in Nigeria is too high and unsustainable. In Oti's words, massive government, miserable populace, cost of governance as economic growth. That's what the paper was actually titled. Governance as economic growth decelerator. Now, this was presented at the 10th anniversary lecture of Adeleke University, Ede, Osun State, sometime last week. According to him, the cost of governance is a drain on the nation's scarce resources, as well as unsustainable given the country's economic predicament. He said the country's brand of democracy was more expensive than even the countries it was copied from. Oti pointed out that Nigerian senators earned about than their counterparts in the United States, adding that the presidency gobbled a large chunk of annual revenue as well. According to him, the budget allocations to the National Assembly between 125 billion naira and 150 billion naira annually are over 15% of the annual combined budget for education and health for 200 million Nigerians. In his words, I quote again, looking at our peculiar circumstances where close to half of our population lives in poverty and in the face of the pandemic that has grounded the world economy, ours included, this amount becomes an issue that deserves closer scrutiny and calls for immediate redress. Furthermore, spending on social services and infrastructures which affect most of the people continues to decline, while that of legislators remains at high level. While the number of legislators remains steady at 469, the general population of Nigeria keeps growing, and about 6 Nigerians drop into poverty every minute. For the sake of time, let's juxtapose Oti's statement, Alex Oti's statement, that of Lawan, and of course that of Asiwaju Tinubu. Now, putting the three together, Asiwaju Tinubu said something that, okay, I'm trying to get his words, to quote his words, but something about how much is being put into it, but how it's being used. Yes, I agree with that totally, that's a major problem. But then, if you look at the expenditure, Nigeria, the amount we push into capital expenditures and the amount we push into recurrent expenditures, one might think that we pay too much attention to the recurrent expenditures, the wages being paid, the salaries being paid, the what they call this thing, allowances being given to certain persons in government position. One might think that all of that should actually be reviewed, and so especially with the peculiar state of the nation when it comes to our economy and all the effects of COVID-19 in our economy. One would think that all of that should be reviewed while we also review other things. Now, as what you said, spending money, expenditure, I would want to think he's talking about the capital expenditure, yeah? It's not a problem. And yes, that is not a problem, because that is one really huge way to raise funds for the nation, to build the nation's economy. But then when millions and billions are being pumped into our capital projects, and unfortunately, at the end of the day, let me take, for example, Today FM Road. It's been given, or it's been budgeted that we spend about $100 billion for the Today FM Road to be rehabilitated. And, well, people might complain that it's too much for just this very small road. How many kilometer road you're spending $100 billion dollar? It will still fly somehow. But at the end of the day, after the amount of money being pumped into such projects, a week later, after commissioning of the road, you see the road begins to deteriorate. You start seeing patches. You start seeing holes, potholes all over the place. It's something that was commissioned 1 week back. Now, the problem might not be, even if some of them might seem outrageous, it might not be exactly how much is being pumped into some of these capital projects, but its use and the results we get from it. If we're not getting any reasonable results from it, then someone that says the amount of money you're putting into such capital projects is not necessary, well, that might be justified, because at the end of the day, you don't see the quality of that. The money you pump into that project cannot be equal to the result of that project. Now, where did the rest of the money go, or why were substandard equipment and resources used for that particular project? But yes, like we pointed out, the recurrent expenditure is also another concern for Nigeria. Let's take, for example, the rehabilitation of what they call it, the National Assembly. As much as one might want to see that as an unnecessary expenditure, You might also want to consider that as much as we're trying to manage, these people need to, they cannot stay in a building and then all of a sudden it falls down one day because people are feeling that you shouldn't rehabilitate the National Assembly. But then, with the current state we're in Nigeria, with our economy, with how things are, with the number of persons diving into poverty every day, with the amount of persons that survive every day with less than $1, would you consider that as a priority for the country as at now? Because they are not backing on it. They are not backing down. It's something that's with a paucity of funds right now. One would think that trying to cut down expenditure, well, that should be part of it. That should be cut down or maybe shifted for the coming years or something. Probably when we've been able to sort of rejuvenate our economy. But no, we're going ahead with that. And when complaints are being made, we still see people come up to say that shouldn't be our priority for now. But like I said, juxtaposing all that Tinubu has said, all that Lawan has said, and also putting it side by side with what Alex Oti have said, I'd love to get what you think regards all of that. How you feel about their different statements at different points in time. We'll move on. Yes, regards Nigeria expenditure. Yeah. We'll move on to another headline. This is on the Vanguard newspaper. It says President Muhammadu Buhari urges leaders to lead by example. The president has called on leaders at all levels to show exemplary leadership so as to overcome the current challenges facing the country. President Buhari made the call in a message to the 2021 annual lecture of Arewa House held on Saturday in Kaduna. Represented by the Chief of Staff, Professor Ibrahim Gambari, the president also called on Nigerians to put the nation first in all their dealings, as well as was done by the country's founding fathers and the likes of Sir Ahmadu Bello. He stressed that good leadership would provide a platform for the nation to overcome its challenges and unlock the huge potentials of the country. In his words, our ability to collectively address the challenges in our country today will go a long way in unlocking its huge potentialities, and the starting point is leadership by example, he said. He also called for commitment to inclusive and provision of quality education, particularly for girls, to develop their full capacity. The president added that there was need to improve coordination and collaboration amongst leaders for good governance at federal, state, and local government levels in a bid to take the country to an enviable height. In his words, we must not assume that the problems of our country should and can be solved by President Buhari administration alone. Yes, we lead by example, but every stakeholder have a responsibility to work collectively and to put the interests of our country first and foremost. We must not forget the virtual selfless service, which was inherent in our founding fathers like the Saldana. We have no choice if indeed we are committed to the welfare, prosperity, peace, and leadership of our people. But to be selfless in service and honor them by making peace and security a cardinal point in all our actions, the president stated. The one question I have to ask is how many of our leaders are leading by example? And of course, we can see the evidence of this example. Now, it's one thing to be a different person in private. Let me take, for example, the leadership. Okay, that might not be a very good example. But then, your personality